Across Egypt, on temple walls built to be read for thousands of years, Ramesses II carved the story of the day he single-handedly broke the Hittite army at the Battle of Kadesh, saved, according to his own account, by nothing but personal courage and the intervention of the god Amun. The carvings never mention that Kadesh stayed in enemy hands, that his own army reached the battle in pieces because he had marched ahead of it, or that the ambush which nearly killed him was a trap his own scouts walked him straight into. This is a story that survives because the side that arguably lost never stopped bragging about it in stone. If tracking down what a pharaoh's propaganda leaves out is the kind of thing you come here for, subscribing helps more of it find you. In the year 1274 BC, the 5th year of his reign, Ramesses II marched a full Egyptian army north into Syria to retake a city that had defected to the Hittites. The rival empire Egypt had been circling for a generation. The city was Kadesh, built on a river bend that made it a choke point for trade and troop movement across the whole region. Whoever held Kadesh effectively held the loyalty of half a dozen smaller kingdoms that paid tribute to whichever empire looked stronger that year. This was not a new fight. Ramesses' own father, Seti I, had spent much of his own reign campaigning against the same rival empire, and briefly held Kadesh himself before it slipped back to Hittite allegiance. Ramesses grew up understanding the city as unfinished family business, the kind of loss a new king was expected to reverse early in his reign, and he moved fast, marching north within only a handful of years of taking the throne. Ramesses organized the army into 4 divisions, each marching under the standard of a different god, and sent them north in a long column strung out for miles, standard practice for moving that many soldiers along one road. North of the city, his scouts brought back 2 men who claimed to be deserters from the Hittite army. Under questioning, the men swore the Hittite king and his forces were still far away, camped well north of Kadesh. Ramesses believed them completely and pushed ahead with only the lead division, the one marching under Amun's own standard, eager to make camp before the rest of the army caught up. The 2 deserters were lying, planted by the Hittites to draw Ramesses forward and pull his forces apart, and it worked exactly as planned. The Hittite king had hidden his entire chariot force behind the city, close enough to watch the Egyptian column string itself out along the road below, each division separated from the next by a gap of hours rather than minutes. As the 2nd Egyptian division, the one carrying Ra's standard, approached the camp in the open, thousands of Hittite chariots broke from cover and tore straight through it. The divisions scattered in minutes, soldiers running for the camp Ramesses had just finished pitching, with the enemy driving in right behind them. Ramesses suddenly had a fraction of the army he thought he was commanding, far outnumbered, with 2 more Egyptian divisions still hours away on the road behind him. His own later account, carved onto the very temple walls that would make him famous, describes soldiers deserting around him and chariots closing in from every side, leaving him, in his own words, entirely alone. Whatever the precise truth behind that image, the danger was not invented. Ramesses had lost the forward troops that should have shielded his camp. His elite chariotry was scattered along with them, and only the ground he refused to give up kept the ambush from turning into a rout before help could even reach him. In 1274 BC, Ramesses II led an Egyptian army into an ambush outside the Syrian city of Kadesh. Enemy scouts had fed him false information, and by the time he realized it, thousands of Hittite chariots had already scattered most of his forces. His own later inscriptions claim he was left standing almost alone against the enemy, saved by his prayers to Amun and by reinforcements arriving in the final hour. Modern historians read the same event rather differently, as a king who marched his own army into a trap and survived mostly on luck. What is not disputed is that a relief force did arrive late in the day, just in time to blunt the Hittite attack and let the scattered Egyptian troops regroup before nightfall. Fighting picked up again the next morning, and by the time both sides pulled back, neither army had broken the other. The Hittites still held Kadesh. Ramesses had lost a sizable part of his army to a trap his own intelligence should have caught. Back in Egypt, Ramesses ordered the battle carved into some of the largest temple walls in the country. At Abu Simbel, his own colossal temple faces the river beside a smaller one built for his wife, Queen Nefertari, and the same battle appears there too, re-fought in stone twice within a few hundred feet of riverbank. Further north, the story was carved again at Karnak, where Ammon's own priesthood watched it added to their god's greatest temple, and once more at Luxor Temple, until a visitor moving through any of Egypt's grandest temples could not avoid Ramesses' version of that day at Kadesh. Every version tells the same story: an enemy ambush, a king abandoned by his own men, and a victory won single-handedly with Amun at his side. Kadesh itself is never mentioned as still standing under Hittite control, and the two deserters who fed him false information disappear from the record entirely. For a long time, the Egyptian temple walls were the only version anyone had. The picture only sharpened once archaeologists excavating the Hittite capital, centuries later, uncovered the empire's own royal archive, thousands of clay tablets recording that side of the story, including its own account of the same campaign. Comparing the two records for the first time, let historians see past the boasting carved into Egyptian stone and reconstruct something closer to what actually happened at Kadesh. Not a rout, not a clean win for either side, but a battle that ended almost exactly where it started, with two exhausted armies and a border that barely moved. 16 years later, Ramesses and the Hittite king who now ruled signed a formal peace, the oldest surviving peace treaty in the historical record. The Egyptian version was carved in hieroglyphs onto temple walls, the Hittite version was pressed into clay tablets in cuneiform, and centuries later, archaeologists working on opposite ends of the ancient world uncovered both, matching each other almost word for word. The treaty did more than end the fighting. It bound both kingdoms to defend each other against outside attack, and guaranteed that anyone who fled from one court to the other would be sent home without punishment, an unusual promise between two rulers who had spent years trying to kill each other's soldiers. Years afterward, Ramesses married a Hittite princess to seal the alliance further, welcoming a former enemy's daughter into his own royal household as one more queen among many. An enlarged copy of the treaty is displayed today at the United Nations headquarters in New York, commonly cited as proof that even ancient enemies could put a war behind them in writing. What historians still debate is not whether the battle happened, but how badly it actually went for Ramesses, since the fullest written account comes from the one king with every reason to make himself look magnificent. What is certain is that the same walls holding up the world's oldest surviving peace treaty also hold up its most famous piece of battlefield spin, carved by a king who understood that stone outlasts memory, and that the only account most people would ever read was the one he chose to leave behind. So which matters more when the record only comes from one side? What actually happened at Kadesh? Or the version stubborn enough to survive 3,000 years in stone? Tell me your verdict in the comments. Ramesses was not the only pharaoh who used a temple wall to control the story. Generations before him, another Egyptian ruler had her own reign erased from the record just as thoroughly, in the opposite direction, not exaggerated, but deleted. That story is for another night.